Theology of the Body. Hi, ladies, it's Mrs. Bone. I'm going to try to be as animated as I am when I teach you, but it's so weird because I actually prefer being in front of you. I miss you all a lot. I'm going to do my best to go through this quickly. Most of what we do when we do lecture format and discussion in class is I ask you a question and we kind of get to where I want you to go by me asking you those questions. And unfortunately, we are not going to be able to do that because I can ask you a question and we're just going to be like, so instead of that, I'm going to kind of take you through the lecture piece of the session 5 workbook that you've been working in. This is going to be pages 90 and 91 of your textbook. Okay. And that's actually the actual pages and not my teacher textbook pages. So I'm on it today, ladies. We're going to be talking a lot about freedom, truth, and love, as we have been all semester, but we're going to talk about it a little more in depth today. Couple of things. Online, you'll notice there's a Google form you're going to need to fill out in accord with this video instruction. So make sure that you either have it open as I'm talking or replay the video or whatever works for you. Okay? Not a big deal. Also, want to just remind you it's pages 90 to 91 and begin with how do you define freedom, which is the first question on your Google form. And I actually have also posted a video in the Google form I want you to look at that will help us kind of walk through and navigate this idea of freedom. Because I think one of our problems in today's society is that the definition of freedom is so personalized that there actually isn't a universal definition. And so someone might say something very similar to, well, that's not what I think freedom is. And what I would like to do by the end of this lecture is come up with a universal definition of freedom that makes everybody happy, because I want freedom to be defined as a universal truth personally, because I don't want my freedom to be hinging on someone else's definition of freedom. Does that make sense? So we call that relativism, right? And that's something else that you've been tackling in your video notes. This concept of relativism essentially says that there is no absolute truth. And we believe that to be very false. There has to be a truth for a human being to live towards a standard. If truth does not exist, then why does the word truth even exist? And if we are constantly living in a relativistic notion of, well, I'm living my truth, everybody has to be able to live truth. We can't live truth as it pertains to us. We have to live truth on a universal level. And I think sometimes we get lost in that. With the expectation that everybody can have their own form of truth when there is in fact universal truth. So we need to begin by defining freedom. And on page 90, Pope John Paul II is quoted extensively throughout Theology of the Body, as you know, but there's a great kind of opening scenario there that talks about being a 16-year-old and being able to drive. And that's truth. And it's also a sense of freedom, right? But doesn't mean you get to run red lights and ignore the speed limit and not use your turn signals and anything else that is a law. That within that freedom, I get to drive, there's this boundary that keeps everybody safe, right? So we can't really define freedom as getting to do whatever we want, whenever we want, because the second we define freedom as I get to do whatever I want, whenever I want, someone else is suffering under our definition of freedom because we have impinged on their rights. Okay. And we can come up with 1,000 different examples of this, but I really want you to think about that a little bit. Is freedom really doing whatever I want, whenever I want? Is that what's best for me? Okay. According to the textbook, it's the ability to desire and to choose the good. So it's in essence this idea, there's a great line in here. If a husband loves his wife, he should freely choose not to flirt with other women. If he loves his children, he should freely choose not to neglect them. With love comes responsibility, which puts the commitments of love into action. A huge quote from John Paul II here. Freedom without responsibility is the opposite of love. So when we say that freedom is doing whatever I want, whenever I want, which is basically the irresponsible definition of freedom, we're essentially saying, I don't love you, right? If freedom means getting to do whatever I want, whenever I want, I don't have to be faithful to my marriage vows. I don't have to obey my parents because I'm doing what I freely want to do. And this freedom that I have, I get to do whatever I want, even though In the process, I'm diminishing my humanity. Okay, so stick with me here. We go on to several different sections here, and I'm going fast, ladies, because I don't want you sitting here for 15 minutes. So my goal is to have you done in 4 minutes and 45 seconds, according to the clock. Okay, freedom of the heart. The truth is we were created for love. Okay, and the freedom of the heart, this big, huge section, is basically saying this, that I want to do what is best, what is good, and choose that, okay, regardless of whether or not it's a rule or a law or a doctrine or something someone's telling me to do, okay? So we go back to the driving example, right? I'm going to follow the rules because I'm going to get from point A to point B safely and have the most amount of freedom. But if I ignore all the rules, if I drive against oncoming traffic, if I run the red light, not only have I destroyed my own freedom, I may have taken my own life or the life of someone else, right? Because I'm following these rules, I have the most freedom. I've shared with you this example before. It's right in the heart of this teaching, which is this, right? When parents put up a fence in their yard to keep their children safe, are they really impinging on their child's freedom? And my answer would be absolutely not, because my 4-year-old is not capable of choosing to not go in the street and recognizing that running in the street is going to get me hurt or maybe even killed. My 4-year-old just wants to run crazy. So if I give him a contained space where he is safe, he can have as much freedom as he wants within boundaries that enable him to have that freedom. But if we would tell a parent they were irresponsible if they didn't put a fence in their yard, and next door was a big old huge mean vicious dog, and there was no fence, and you let your kid run around, well, they'll be okay. I mean, I've got to give them freedom. They've got to have the freedom to choose, right? We would be like, you're being irresponsible. It's common sense, but we get so inundated with the secular definition of everything from freedom to love, you name it. We get so inundated with all of this stuff that we start to kind of believe it, right? But freedom is really being able to choose the good 100% of the time. It's being able to do what's best for yourself. And freedom is in that choice of good. That's where freedom lies, okay? That's where the freedom lies, okay? Couple of other things that I want to get to really quickly here. The idea that God always respects our free will, right? This free will thing that gets us into trouble all the time. My glasses are kind of crooked, aren't they? Sorry, I digress. But we always get lost in this idea that stop constricting me. Stop telling me what to do. Okay, well then choose the good 100% of the time. You'll be the happiest you've ever been. And you chose it. So nobody told you what to do, right? These boundaries exist because we're loved, right? Tough love is not popular. It's just not popular. So anything goes is popular, right? And we've got to be really, really careful with that. I think we've got to be really, really careful with that, okay? Couple of other things to consider, okay? So many things in this chapter. Living a moral life that enacts the principles that God would want us to enact because we love God and not because he told us to do it, right? You can apply this to your relationship with your parents, okay? No matter where your relationship with your parents is today, if you're good friends or not, if you get along or not, if you're teenagers, you probably are not always on the best of terms. But here's the drill. You'll know that your relationship with your parents has matured when you recognize that what they're doing for you is for your own good and because they love you. And yes, there are rules and there are laws and there are guidelines that they've set in place, but they love you. And that's why they've set them in place. So when you figure out, oh, they just do this because they love me and not because they're trying to keep me from having the best time of my life, then following the rules is not a big deal because you're choosing good all the time, right? It's about building trust. It's about building trust back and forth. This happens with God, our Father, too, right? That's why the parental relationship is so very, very important. That's why it's so important, because it becomes the first experience of love for a kid. So very important for you to understand that love is, I choose to do this because it's the right thing to do. And law is, well, I'm being told what to do, so I have to do it, right? You have to figure out the difference, because love can't exist without a guideline, without a boundary. Real love can't exist, right? So you have to ask yourself all of these questions as we're moving along. Big time question is, how does the definition, the universal, the secular definition, freedom is being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want. That's the secular definition. We're trying to get away from that definition, right? How does that actually enslave me? How does getting to do whatever I want, whenever I want, make me a slave? And what am I a slave to? I want you to think about that when you're answering the worksheet I put in place for you, the Google form, okay? If we know the laws of God, but do not know the heart of the one who gave them to us, then we will not trust him, and we will assume that we're going to be able to find our fulfillment elsewhere. So we know the laws. I should do this, I shouldn't do that, I should do this. But if we don't know him, right? Relationship with Christ, daily prayer. If we don't know him, then they're just going to be rules. It's going to be a book of regulations, just like any book of regulations, right? And it's important to know the why behind the what, but more importantly, the who. Jesus loves you, ladies, and so do I. And this has been longer than it's supposed to, and I miss you so much. I'm going crazy. Okay, love you, bye. Well, almost bye.